Okay. Hey, everybody. I wasn't sure my feed was going to be working there for a minute. It looked like the half the screen was going to be a little fuzzy. Um, I basically kind of just wanted to start out this morning and give you guys a little bit of kind of like a recap of chapter one of your readings from the actual textbook. Again, the thing that even the previous teachers of this course have told me is that it's been so long since they've tried to um, update the material used in gender studies, the intro to gender studies course, that this book is really dated. As such, it's very, I'll put it this way, it's very basic. Really, if you went back and looked at the first two lectures I gave you, I don't think there's a whole lot that I pretty much wasn't just sort of using as boilerplate, if you understand what that term means, like just to get us thinking about things that really I mean was really much less involved than this actual chapter. There were some things that I wanted to kind of key in on though. And one thing that popped into my head, and if you'll notice, I have my this is my handheld camera, because I wanted to be able to show you a clip on and that was my email chime. Sorry. I wanted to be able to show you all a clip from it was from an episode of ESPN's series called 30 for 30, where they look at like a sports figure and kind of, their life or something they did. Anyway, in the 1980s, when the NFL really started getting popular, and I remember this incident happening, and I also remember when the NFL really started to get big. I mean, not like it is now, but they, I think now they would have a hard time doing this, but there used to be, pardon me, I ate pizza for breakfast. How about that one? When you're quarantined, that's what you do. So there was, again, I don't know that they would even be able to get away with this today, but there used to be like, I'm trying to think of how to describe it, like a segment on CBS's pre-football game show. Okay, obviously, like if you're a football fan, they still have the pre-game shows. And obviously, a lot of the channels still do give you what's called like the Vegas line. Okay, the Vegas line basically is like a point spread system. So if you're going to go gamble, you understand that, like, if, again, I'm going to give you guys an example. If you're NFL fans, okay, let's think of a team that's really, really bad. Like, off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of the worst team I can think of. This past season, the Jaguars were pretty bad. Okay, I mean they've had some okay seasons, but they were pretty bad. Let's say like the Jaguars are going to play the Chiefs. Okay, smart money's on the Chiefs every time. All right, but a Vegas point spread, what it's going to tell you basically is, okay, well, if you're going to go and put money like through a Vegas gambling, facilitator, if you're going to put money on the Chiefs and the point spread is like 8, okay, well, if the Chiefs win by 6, you lose your money. Okay, like the Chiefs have got to cover that spread for you to win the money. You're not just picking the winner. That's why they use a point spread, because it would be too easy to just pick a winner. Okay, so where am I going with this? Back in the day, they used to have a segment on CBS with a guy named Jimmy the Greek Snyder. And Jimmy Snyder was pretty notorious. He was notorious outside of football circles for being what they call like a handicapper. A handicapper is someone who goes around and they come up with the numbers. They figure out gambling lines. He also, I think, did a lot of this illegally, which again is why like they wouldn't have a separate segment today, I don't think, on TV, where a guy basically would come on there and explain to you the point spreads and how it's all done. Because I think that would be to encourage gambling. And I think the NFL is not encouraging gambling. Notice I'm using the quotes. So at any rate, so you're probably thinking like, at this point, if you don't know anything about this, you're like, Dr. Root, what on earth are you going on and on about? Okay. I want to show you this clip, and it basically is one that ended Jimmy the Greek Snyder's career, because he started diving into the kind of issues we're talking about in these, especially in these opening chapters. And clearly he was out of his element, and he made himself look really, 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 really bad. So let me go ahead and blow this up and see if I can get my camera on it so that you can see it. Because you got to remember, actually, you know what I can do? Let me do this. Take it off the full screen so that I can get it situated here at least a little bit. Oops. Sorry about that. Okay, if I hold it here, this should be good. All right. And I'll turn my volume up as much as I can get it. Here we go. Okay.
From WRC TV was asking questions about Martin Luther King's birthday and the progress blacks have made in society. There, CBS sports commentator Jimmy the Greek Snyder gave his impressions of blacks in coaching in the National Football League. His answers could raise as much controversy as the statements by former Dodgers executive Al Campanis last April on ABC's Nightline news program.
Yeah, pretty soon they're going to have to equalize it for the blacks, for the Greeks, the Jews, and for everybody. I mean, let's make it equal for everybody. You know.
And is it equal? What about in sports?
Well, they've got everything. If they take over coaching like everybody wants them to, there's not going to be anything left for the white people. I mean, all the players are black. I mean, the only thing that the whites control is the coaching jobs. Now, I'm not being derogatory about it, but that's all that's left for them. So black talent is beautiful. It's great. It's out there. It's, you know, the only thing left for the whites is a couple coaching jobs.
Yeah, maybe we need to get more black coaches, don't you?
Oh, it's all right with me.
Okay, well,
I'm sure that they'll take over that pretty soon, too.
WRC was apparently flooded with complaint calls after the Snyder comments were aired. Snyder issued an apology saying he was truly sorry for anything he said. CBS spokesperson said no decision has been made as to whether Snyder will work Sunday's NFL Today broadcast. Snyder is spending the night with Gene Upshaw, the Players Union executive director in Washington, and he has received support calls from Walter Payton and Ahmad Rashad.
Okay, now give me one moment to readjust my camera here. All this technology stuff's getting old, guys. I don't know what you think, but it's getting old to this guy here. Just trying to get it to work. It's just a pain in the butt. Because I can't get that thing angled where I want it either. Again, I apologize for this. Sorry. Maybe it'll stay there. Maybe. Okay, that's good enough for now. So, yeah, I mean, if you looked at those comments, basically what you saw was an abbreviated version of actually what he actually said in that interview that really put him in hot water. Was he started going into almost what we would call probably like a there's a word for it, and I can't think of it right now off the top of my head. Pardon me. He went into like what he believed to be was like a very, educated explanation as to why he felt that black athletes were now sort of becoming like the standard bearers, and why white athletes were sort of, in his mind, starting to diminish. And what he did was he went into an explanation that's kind of discussed in your textbook here. And where I was actually looking was like even the very early pages, like pages 4, where, it's talking about historically and even working into this week's chapters, which is kind of why I wanted to talk about it, working into 6 and 7, where it talked about manliness during slave times. Well, one of the things that he went into, it was sort of a, I don't want to say it was completely inaccurate, but at the very least, it was a racist comment. I mean, even, and you have to remember, like, even at the time, you know, when people probably tended to be less filtered and less politically correct than they are today, even at the time, people knew, like, yeah, you know, he went a little overboard there. What he basically said was the reason that the black athlete was superior to the white athlete was that when the white slave owner bought his slaves, and again, I couldn't find this clip. There's probably a good reason it's probably being copyrighted or something, because you could see that was just off of like a news broadcast. He said something like, when the white slave owner or master, whichever term, bought the black slaves and he put them in their slave quarters, he made sure that he put the most genetically superior black male slave with the most genetically, and what he basically said was that was almost like it was genetic engineering, and that's why black people in sports were so superior to whites, because they had almost basically been genetically engineered to be that way. Now, we do know that some of that was true. Some slave owners did definitely pair up their more genetically superior female slaves with the genetically superior male ones. For them, you have to remember, you know, again, and I'm certainly not defending slavery. Slavery is absolutely horrible. Anybody who doesn't think that is an idiot. What I mean is, though, you have to remember, first and foremost, for most of those people, slavery was an investment. It was a business. So the way that, you know, you make sure your investment, you're getting everything you can out of it, is to protect it. Well, the way to make the most out of your investment is you would take you owned slaves that could do more than, you know, a very thin, weak slave would be able to do. And obviously there's no way to predict genetics either. You know, I have red hair. No one else in my family does. Okay. I mean, so what I'm getting at is you can't predict it. I mean, you could have a 240-pound male who's built like a truck, and you could have, you know, I don't even know what women's weights or something. I don't even want to jump in that boat. But a woman who you could tell would be very stout, and pair them, and there's no guarantee their offspring were going to end up being some sort of superhuman. There's just no way to know that. But my point was he went around and made that claim, and then of course he even further. Well, the coach is the one who draws up all the plays and is sort of the brains behind the operation. So it was almost like what he was implying was that white people were smarter and therefore better qualified to coach, and the blacks were better athletes, which made them qualified to be told what to do to play. And then a couple of years back, Rush Limbaugh, who was a very conservative political analyst, he explained that, and as I remember, and again, I know you guys are younger, he used Donovan McNabb as an example. Donovan McNabb was a quarterback. He actually played at Syracuse when I was in college. So he's probably a little older than me. I say maybe he's 2-3 years older than me. And he played for the Philadelphia Eagles. I think and then for the Redskins. He played the end of his career with the Redskins. And what he basically said was the reason that Donovan McNabb didn't win the Super Bowl when he was with the Eagles. They played the Patriots, and I think it was 2004. He said that the reason the Eagles didn't win was Donovan McNabb was not an intelligent quarterback, and that historically the reason black quarterbacks were not successful is they weren't smart enough. They weren't as smart as the white guys. And of course, you know, once again, I mean, not only is that incredibly racist and, you know, myopic, but it's not true. It just isn't. There's no proof to that being the case. Okay, so again, one of the things that it talked about was again, like, and I'm just kind of looking over here at my other laptop. If you wonder why, like, what is he looking at? My other laptop's over here because I can't pull up my notes on here. You'd be looking at all kinds of, like, I don't know, you'd see a tree like out my window or something. So, I'm just looking here. I'm trying to zip through this so that I don't beat you guys to death with this stuff that I've probably already kind of talked about. One of the reasons why, also, in looking at this, why I want you guys to look at the episodes of Three's Company that I've put online is because they deal with a lot of the stuff that actually your book is going to get into, particularly regarding feminism. Okay, you have to understand that feminism came in waves, 3 waves. I believe the second wave was the 60s, if I remember right. Let me see. Yeah. And the third wave was in the 70s. And that's when Three's Company started. I think that show started in probably about I'm going to take a guess here. I'm going to say 1975 to 77 maybe was when it originated. So you have to remember, like, feminism was a movement then. I'm sorry, I'm cleaning my glasses because the sun coming in the window here is getting all the smudges on my glasses and making it hard for me to see. And so a lot of what you see in those episodes, you'll hear them even talk about sometimes ERA, Equal Rights Amendment, Equal Rights Now. The third wave of feminism was a little more militant. And that's what I think also Three's Company was trying to do, in a manner of speaking, was satirizing a little bit of that. Because you had Janet and Chrissy, who, again, if you guys haven't watched the show, watch it. I put 2 episodes on your Moodle page that I wanted you to look at in particular. And Janet, while being, probably a pretty good example of, like, I don't know if she owned the flower shop she worked at, but she worked at a flower shop. She was very good at her job. She was more conscientious. She wasn't, again, like Cindy, the character of Cindy, or Chrissy. I'm sorry, Cindy was her cousin who came in later. Chrissy she was supposed to be a ditz. She was supposed to be an airhead. And again, one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of give you guys those as examples is they're really a good example, I think, for you all to look at, because these shows were airing probably about 20 years before you were born. 20 to 25 years is a generation. You guys can look at these and see what was going on a generation before you were born. It's not like, again, I'm not trying to take away from the more extended version of history that the textbook covers. Like, what I'm getting at is, I don't want you to just concentrate on the last generation, but the point I'm of why I'm using Three's Company is, I think for you guys, it's maybe seeing it visually too. It makes it easier to understand some of the things. And the fact is a generation is usually enough time for a change to occur. And what you're going to see now in the world compared to even what you would see in an episode of Three's Company, it's just a different place. I mean, for example, and I don't know that you'll see it particularly, like, specifically in any of the episodes, but again, you have to remember, when I gave you guys, I explained the plot to you, and I even summarized it on your Moodle page. Jack had to pretend to be gay so that he could live with Chrissy and Janet. And the landlord, Mr. Roper, he's like the old school, sort of like caveman, just typical old school, crotchety old man. And in a lot of the episodes, what he used to do when he would see Jack, is he would do this gesture to him. Okay. Well, basically all that meant was that, again, it's derogatory. And I don't know that your book dives into a lot of the derogatory stuff, but what this was a symbol for was like a Tinkerbell, which would be another way of saying fairy, which is another way of saying someone would be homosexual. These are slang terms. And again, the whole thing you have to remember was Jack's not gay. Jack had to play that role so that he could have a place to live. And so a lot of the show really does deal with the idea that, you know, gender is constructed. Gender is a social perception. Jack is not, as you'll see in one of the episodes, he's not a physically imposing guy. He's not an intimidating guy. His chosen profession then, okay, now again, quick example of a generational shift. Think about when you watch, I'm not saying you do, I do, because I like to cook. Say if you watch like the Food Network. Think for a minute about how many shows you see on like the Food Network that are hosted by men. I mean, I can think right off the top of my head, like Robert Irvine, that British dude with the guns. That dude's huge. Guy Fieri. I don't know that Gordon Ramsay comes on the Food Network, but Gordon Hirohito Ono or something like that. What I'm getting at is nowadays being a chef is much more considered to be much more of a masculine profession than it was a generation ago. That's what Jack's job was. And that's another reason why on the show, you know, a lot of times he took a lot of flack because being a chef was considered an expansion of what a woman's role was. Women were supposed to be the ones who cooked, not men. So Jack, they gave him this job. Doesn't matter to me. I mean, if people think that's feminine, I mean, that's fine by me. I like to cook, you know. And Jack, in a way, I guess what I'm saying is, you know, in a manner of speaking, we could almost look back and say that character is kind of groundbreaking in a way, because even though I think they were presenting him in a way, anything people saw would be a trend, but here we are, and it is. So, you know, one of the things your chapter ends up with is, why is, you know, gender history important? Well, the reason why, you know, gender history is really important is probably for the reason I was just saying. Again, I think a lot of the stuff I'm going to be talking about just as out of common sense, I think is going to end up being reflected by your text. Gender history is really important because unless we understand how and why and the context under which, you know, gender roles were established, how are we ever going to understand how we got where we are right now? One of the things a word I always like to use when I talk about gender is arbitrary. Okay, those of you that don't know what the word arbitrary means, it means sort of like without any, something that's done without any specific rationale, something that's done that almost seems like it's just done sort of capriciously or just, you know, randomly. That might be a good word for it. The examples I always use are like, okay, well, for example, and none of you should smoke, by the way, if nothing else should convince you of that, this virus that's going around should, because people who smoke are having a lot more, it's been documented, they're having a lot more problems fighting off this infection than people. Who made that number? Why 18? Why not 25? Why not 15? I mean, again, the reason I'm asking this is not that I have a problem with it. I don't care. I don't smoke. But my point is when I was in high school, for example, you know, you're going to go around and dabble and experiment. But when I was 15 and thought it was cool to try to smoke anyway, I was always angry that I couldn't go buy a pack of cigarettes because I wasn't 18. Then I got to be 18 and I was kind of like, big deal. Well, my point is who made that 18? Why do you have to be 21 to buy alcohol? And someone one time told me, well, you know, scientific studies have proven that, you know, your brain is at 21, blah, blah, blah. I mean, okay. Why is the speed limit on some interstates 65? Why on others is it 70? You know, what I'm getting at is, you know, a lot of times it seems like it's just a rule is a rule because it's a rule. Okay. And where I'm going with this is, a lot of the things that we have been coached into believing or thinking or subscribing to as being normative. What I'm trying to get you all to understand is that a lot of it, I don't know that we could really explain it. A great example is like, well, why is it that when a baby is born, if it's a girl, they at the hospital they'll wrap them in like a pink blanket or a little pink, you know, onesie or whatever they put a baby in, and a boy is in a blue one. I mean, what does it matter? You know, I remember, again, I know he still raps. I don't think he's as popular these days, but like, I remember Cameron, he took a lot of flack because he got to a point where like he was wearing all pink stuff. And of course, you know, those gender roles came into play and people were like, well, you know, that's sissy. Or, you know, the same thing with, again, one of the reasons why I wanted you to watch the episodes of Three's Company. Who stipulated what a masculine job is? You know, like, I mean, is working at the post office a masculine job? Is working at Lowe's a masculine job? I mean, I think what I'm getting at is, I think most people these days don't think of their job in those terms. They think of their job as in, I have a job because I need to make money and I need to work. It's, again, like, I asked you guys in the little survey that I passed out about teachers. You know, even me, and I'm a teacher. I've been teaching for almost 20 years. I tend to think women are the predominant gender role as teachers. So what I'm saying is, you know, for me to sit here and go, my job is masculine, would, you know, if I think that, fine. But what I'm getting at is, again, these perceptions, they don't change overnight, for one thing. And for two, they're perceptions that have been around usually for a while. And it takes a while for those perceptions to fade away or to, you know, or to blend some. And I think now what you're seeing is, and I know that some of my students actually put this in their answers to those, that, you know, apparently now there is such a shortage of Black male teachers that, like, you know, incentives are being offered to like Black male college graduates to go into the teaching profession, which, again, I think is a good thing. I think we need to have as many different perspectives when it comes to teaching as we can have. You know what I mean? That's one of the reasons why I always try to, when I teach something, I always try to look at it from viewpoints that aren't just my own. I'm like anybody else, you know, I have my own beliefs, my own stereotypes, my own biases. Everybody does. I always try to kind of play devil's advocate, because for me to do otherwise would be for me to tell you that I'm right all the time. And I'm not, you know, my opinions on something don't make me right just because I have 3 college degrees. That doesn't make me right. So of how you view things, because I think until we know where we're at, we can't have an honest view of anything. Pardon me. We have to know why we have the perceptions we do. And some of your answers, you know, unfortunately, were really short. What I wanted you to do was to actually write out, you know, a little bit more of an explanation about why you think something. Because, again, like, if I can see that like 7 out of 8 of you think that women are more likely to be flight attendants than men, I would like to know why you think that. Because again, is it personal experience? And here's the reason why I would say probably not for most of you, because you're young, you probably haven't done that much air travel. So my point is obviously if you think women are predominantly they're the predominant gender that's flight attendants, there has to be a reason you think that. And like I said, I'm not attacking you all. It's just you all probably have not done that much flying. I'm twice your age. I've probably only flown, a dozen times. There's something that, in the quote unquote water that makes us think that way. And that's what I want us to get at. I want us to be able to understand why we have the stereotypes we have. That's important. And the whole thing is that although in a perfect world, we wouldn't have those stereotypes or biases, we don't live in a perfect world. What the situation we're living through right now proves we don't live in a perfect world. Okay. And again, some people in here who are more religious, they're probably going to go back and they're going to go all the way back to the book of Genesis and say, well, women were inferior ever since Eve took a bite of that apple. Well, Adam, let me play devil's advocate again. Adam wasn't too, what's the word? Adam wasn't too hesitant to take a bite of that apple too. Okay. Then you got the people who go, well, women were formed from the rib of a man. Again, fine. But what I'm saying is, I think there are so many dynamics, and I'm not sure from what I've read in your book. I mean, again, this book is old. From what I've read of it so far, I mean, it's okay in giving you kind of a bare bones look at something. I don't know that it pries deeply. I like to try to get people to think. That's more than just beating you with facts or theories. But here's a thought, okay? And I think this is probably where I'll wrap up. I have a book that is coming out in June, and it's about the Puritans. And the Puritans were basically like the first group that came to America sort of en masse. And because they made it over here, and in large part, they survived. I mean, yeah, there obviously were deaths, and some of them didn't make it over. But one of the points of my book is to show that, the reason that as Americans, we have a lot of the beliefs that we have is because of the Puritans. The Puritans sort of laid the fabric of this country, and their beliefs naturally became the beliefs of subsequent generations of Americans. It just happened that way. And, they were, at least they claimed to be, again, I don't want to give us spoilers of my book. They claimed to be very, God-fearing, pious, God-centered people. Now, again, whether or not you think that, buy my book. Whether or not you think that, that's probably not that important. What's probably more important is that you understand that a lot of what we still believe as Americans was originated with them. And that's not saying that they're right. What I'm saying is that their views sort of filtered down into where we are now. And I'm not saying all their beliefs are still around. They're not. I mean, you got to remember, like, they were burning witches and stuff. I mean, who does that? Who does that now, right? Okay, but my point is we need to understand the hows and whys and the contexts of things in order to have a better idea of why we think those things are true. And again, I'm going to wait until my next lecture to get back into the historical part, really, about like, I noticed that like chapter 6 had to do with like masculinity and stuff in the South. which I think is important for us because that's where we live. Even if you're not originally from this geographical area, you still ought to know it, because I mean, you are now you're here. You ought to, because it probably will help you understand the way some people who live in the South still behave, actually, for better or worse. You know, again, the idea that a woman's place was in the home. I mean, you know, that didn't just happen. I mean, that started with Puritans, at least in America. Okay, that's where I'm going with. I'm sticking with American culture here. The idea that America would be a Christian country started with Puritans. I mean, that was them. Believing what they call the Puritan work ethic. That's what it used to be called. That then it later became known as American determinism. If you're willing to work hard for something, you can get it. These are Puritan ideas, okay? And I would argue that, you know, in their own way, they're also all genderized, because let's be honest, and I'll say one more thing too. They're also culturally genderized. And this is probably a good place to stop to end my lecture too, because let's be honest. Although I grew up very poor, those of you who've had me before have probably heard me talk about, you know, my upbringing a little bit. I grew up in now what would have probably been like being viewed, you know, as far as, I'm not saying about how we behaved, but as far as how much money we had, we probably would have been considered close to being white trash, would be a word I mean, we didn't have anything. My mom made our clothes. I was always raised to think that if I worked hard, I could succeed at things. That's one of the reasons why my parents were really big on me and my brother going to college, and nobody in our family had ever gone to college. You know, again, where I'm going with this is that, you know, that idea of American determinism, what we have to understand is, you know, it's not, unfortunately, I think it's improving based on what I've seen again. And you have to understand too, your teacher is limited, for a number of reasons, because one, you know, I'm the lens of a straight male. What I think we want to admit to ourselves, regardless of our ethnicity, our gender, our faith, our beliefs, is that the American dream, as it's been called, is something that has been historically limited, or at least historically it has favored certain genders and ethnic groups over others. So for me as a white male to sit here and say, I think through my lifetime, like I said, if I was like, you know, 80 years old, I could probably give you a different perspective. But being 40, I can just tell you that through my lifetime, I think it has improved. I think it's still, you know, it still needs to be improved. But for me to sit here and say that everybody, if you work hard, has an equal chance of succeeding, I think I'd be insulting your intelligence. Again, I think it's getting better. I think it has gotten better. But even though I grew up very poor, I think that there is still something historically to be said for white privilege. I think there's still something historically to be said for it. I may not have experienced a ton of it myself, but I think historically there's something to be said for it. because again, not every group has had the same access to those things. And I think, again, that particularly comes down in gender, where women, particularly women of color, women of different ethnicities, I think they have had a very, very, very steep hill to climb. And I think it's just now starting to get to where, they have gained a little bit of traction, and the world is I think starting to kind of come around to the idea that, if you can do the job, you hire the person. If they can't, you don't. Like for me, if I had a stack of 20 resumes, and I know nothing about the person other than what I see on the resume, let me tell you something right now. If I'm running a business, I don't care if that person's white, black, green, purple. I don't care if they're male, female, transgendered. I don't care. If they can do the job, dude, that's who I'm hiring. And I think that attitude has become more prevalent, because I think my Generation X, I think that's more kind of the way that we've seen the world move. And so that's more our attitude. Whereas like 50 years ago, they might have looked at a stack of resumes blindly, but if they brought in, let's just say, for example, an African-American woman who was applying for a job, a lot of people would have gone, well, I'm not hiring this person, even if that was the best person for the job. But you see, to me, that makes no sense, because the world I was raised in was the one where, we were looking at the stock market. We were looking at making our money. We were looking at being efficient. We were looking at, everything when I was growing up. It was all about that bottom line. And to me, I want to hire that person who's going to give me the best chance to have the best bottom line. I don't care what they look like. I don't care about their gender. That doesn't matter to me. And again, I'm giving you my opinion. And what I'm saying is, you're always going to run across people that are bigots and that don't think that way. I'm not trying to tell you, you won't. And historically speaking, those people have always been there. And they're not going to ever go away completely. It's just not going to happen. Okay. But my point is much like in the show Three's Company, those characters all sort of had a niche, and they filled their niche, and each one of them did pretty good within their niche, really. And again, I'm not saying the show isn't full of stereotypes, because it is, because that's the joke of the show. But what I am saying is, I think that we need to understand that, this country was founded on certain things. And when customs, the longer, it's sort of like that idea, that old habits are hard to break. Well, when a country's founded on customs, those customs, they permeate and they permeate and they permeate, and they gain traction. And it's hard to just say, well, we're eliminating that now. It takes a while. It takes a while for those things to leave the greater consciousness. And I think that's a good place to wrap up, where, what I think we'll look at probably in my next lecture. I also want you to watch the Three's Company episodes, because one, I think you'll think they're funny. And two, I think they'll help you understand that, even just 25, 30 years ago, the stereotypes and the ideas that people had about both men and women were way, way different than they are now. And that was just 25 years ago. So when you think about, the slavery, like the days of slavery that you're going to read about, I mean, that was, slavery was outlawed here, or at least, the Emancipation Proclamation was 1863. So, I mean, that's 160 years ago almost. Things have, moved along. And I think we need to understand, where we started, where we've been, where we are, and where we're going, in order to get a better idea of how all this stuff is like a matrix, about how all this stuff kind of came together to be the way it is. Because, there's an old saying, if you don't know your history, you're going to be doomed to repeat it. Well, I mean, I'll end on this. Look at what we're going through right now with this COVID-19 virus. Not that any of you all would have read about it, but you can go back and read diaries that were written in the 1660s about the plague in England, where they're talking about stuff that's not too unlike this. It's just that they didn't have the medical capabilities that we do now. So people were just dying left and right of this plague. And the streets, just full of dead bodies, just people laying out in the street, just dead bodies. And, I think the problem is that, and this happened around the world, not just here. I think people got caught with their pants down on this one. This virus came in, and I mean, I don't think anybody thought that this thing was going to be like this. And I think that's a good parallel to kind of end this on, where we got to know our history so that we don't make the same mistakes that people made in the past, or at least we're aware of those mistakes enough to go, okay, I see that's happening right now. And I think that's, again, that's why history is so important. And we don't want to neglect that. And I realize that, again, some of you, when you watch these Three's Company episodes, you may think they're silly. Well, they're supposed to be. But remember one thing, behind every joke, there's truth. And these TV shows also, you have to remember, they're older than me. Some of them are older than me. They're meant to represent the time in which they're being made. So what they are is they're almost though comical and fictional, they're a historical document in a way of what was going on then. So I want you to look at those. I want you to do the reading. And next time I come back at you with a lecture, I'll probably have a little bit more hard facts and stuff. And I'll go back and look through and make sure that there aren't any, assignments that kind of come to me. And maybe I want to throw in a blog or something here and there. But I hope these lectures, and I know they're pretty meat and potatoes, but I hope they're helping you in some way, at the very least, to question why we, meaning all of us as individuals and us as Americans and us as a culture, why we do look at things the way we do. Because America is a very, as far as it goes, it's a very unique place, believe it or not. And that probably also can be traced back to the fact that America was the melting pot. I mean, America was the place where cultures of all, people of all different cultures and nationalities, this is where they came. This is where they ended up. I mean, you want to know why, people call, at least they used to, why people call the vehicle the police drive around in and they put all the people they arrest in the back of it. You want to know why they call it a paddy wagon? Because the Irish were typically the police, and that's what they drove. And the derogatory nickname for Irish people are paddies. So that's where that comes from. The Irish people, like me, the Irish guys, they were called paddies. That was where the term paddy wagon came from. That's just one example among many. So think about stuff, do the reading, and as long as we keep moving through things, I think this class is going to run fine. My biggest thing, I know I keep saying I'm going to wrap up, but stuff keeps popping into my head. I guess my brain is getting going the longer I'm awake. The one thing I stated up front, and again, there are some of you in here who had me before as a teacher, and I think if any of your classmates expressed any concerns to you about this, you could set them straight. For the most part, as long as you do the work, and I can tell you're trying, and you're turning the work in on time, and I see that you're thinking, you are not going to have any problems. But if you start getting lazy, you start getting complacent, I can tell you just don't care, you're not really trying, then, this class may be an uphill battle for you. But for the most part, I'm a pretty fair guy. I just want you to get something from the class. That's really what I want. And what my term of getting something from the class typically means is you're thinking, because I think that that's something that's greatly lacking in our country today is people taking the time to think about things for themselves. And I think that's why one of the reasons why the media is such a problem. We can even get into that in later discussions too, because I think that factors into a lot of things too, particularly involving gender. I mean, just think for 1 second about like the way the media uses women in advertising. Great example there. I believe I might even actually have you reading some articles on that. I can't remember if that's in this class or in my Men and Masculinities class, but at any rate, that's where I'm going to wrap up. Probably look for another lecture sometime before the end of the week. I'm teaching 5 classes, so I'm doing at least a lecture, sometimes 2 a day. And as you can tell, man, I have allergies. I was outside working all day yesterday, and my throat is dry, and my voice keeps cracking like a little kid, which is embarrassing, but it is what it is. At any rate, that's where I'm going to end. I hope you all are taking care of yourselves. Please practice your social distancing. I know it's getting old to hear people telling you that. Again, it doesn't mean cloister yourself in your room like a monk. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is just go, if you go out, and you for whatever reason you need to go out, though I don't think you should go out unnecessarily. Don't feel like you have to scream from across the quad at your friend, but at the same time, you probably don't need to be 3 inches from their face either. Okay. Just be smart. And as I said before too, we will get through this. The Bible says it, this too shall pass. It'll pass. And we will, hopefully everybody will all be the better for this. We'll learn something from it. And then next time around, again, like I said earlier, next time around, maybe history won't repeat itself if we learn something from this. But the thing I fear is that so many people, they don't see the handwriting on the wall, and they don't learn anything from things like this. And then what's going to happen is next time around, it's going to be something even worse. And who knows? Let's just pray that doesn't happen. Okay. So again, take care of yourselves, be good, take care of each other. And if you have any questions, thoughts, or comments, opinions, statements, email them to me, put them on Moodle. I'll be more than happy to engage in a conversation with you guys. Okay. So on that note, I'll be seeing you.